It's really interesting that you said that you wanted to come over here to sort of influence change on a smaller scale, because the Isle of Man being in the unique position that it is, we have to have everything here that a pregnant woman could possibly need.
Well, yes, but I think that the challenge with being an isolated service is you don't necessarily network with your neighbours quite so well. So for the past couple of years, particularly in England, there's been a big national review of maternity services focusing on what women want, and that was called the Better Births campaign. Now, lots of things that are recommended in that campaign are already present in the Isle of Man, so we have lots of continuity of care. We have great services. We don't have queues of women waiting to get onto the labour ward because it's overbooked. But at the same time, there's opportunities to pick up some of that learning, particularly from what women want. And so I'm very interested in picking up the Maternity Voices Partnership work that's been underway in England particularly, and bringing that to the Isle of Man, so that women that are interested in improving births for themselves or for others, perhaps charities and volunteers, organisations such as La Lèche League, can get involved in helping us shape our services for the future.
How do you see that being implemented over here then? What would it take?
Well, I've started meeting with individuals that have been providing support to women in either their pregnancy or afterwards. And so our plan is to form a steering committee, and then from that steering committee we'll look at campaigns that we might prioritise. Clearly in my webpage I indicated that we'd like to reintroduce the home birth service. Now that's probably the demand has exceeded what we can deliver at the moment, because it is delivered on a goodwill basis, because midwives have to be trained and confident to deliver that. So at the moment the home births are provided by a group of midwives that feel confident to do that, and hopefully we'll roll that out with our training so that a larger number of midwives can get involved and provide more home births for women that want them.
Roughly how many midwives do we actually have on the Isle of Man, and do you think we have enough?
Well, we've got about 40 midwives, which has been assessed as being right for the number of births we have. And what provides us a little bit of extra pressure at times is the fact that the midwives are also providing the theatre support, such as being the scrub nurse role in theatre, which takes them away from either the ward or care of other labouring women. And we're looking to recruit more people to provide that theatre support, and that may be more nurses or more midwives, but that's the gap that we have that sometimes causes a little bit of a peak in the pressure on the midwives that are available.
I'm really interested in what you said there about home births as being encouraged as more of an option, because I think it would be fair to suggest that in recent years they've been seen as a bit alternative, haven't they? But I suppose there is a lot to say for having a home birth, particularly in a place where if anything doesn't go to plan, you can quickly and easily get to a hospital.
Well, the home birth service here has, for the last few years, been only really available to people that can pay for that privately. So we've got good working relationships with an independent midwife who comes from across, but obviously that's not ideal. And she's working with us closely, so she lets women that approach her know that we're looking at the home birth service. So I've had quite a lot of chats with her, and she's quite willing to help us support to deliver that. The problem is that means that only those that can afford to pay have that service, and we want to make that available for everyone in the future.
You do have children yourself. I just wonder how your own birth experiences influenced the way that you dealt with the women in your care.
I was very lucky because obviously being a midwife, I had midwives I knew that looked after me during my birth. And I did expect when my children had their own babies, they'd be calling upon my services. But I was quite surprised to see that I was the last person they asked for advice. They much preferred their NCT colleagues or their apps. And I think they looked at me as a bit out of date and really probably not really knowing what I was talking about. So it was a bit of a shock to the system, but I'm the kind of person that I only give advice if I'm asked for it. And it was quite nice really to concentrate on being the grandma rather than being the midwife. So it was an interesting time, and I did watch with interest the choices that my children and their partners made, so it was quite a fun time.
You say that they maybe looked at you as being sort of out of date, and you're talking about apps and things. You know, in the amount of time that you've been involved in this sort of industry, it must have changed so much. What have been some of the biggest changes?
I think we've had a lot of IT, which means that sometimes it feels that the paperwork requirements can be quite onerous. You know, I've had complaints from women in other services where they say, well, the midwife sat in the corner of the room writing all the time. But with the increases in people that try to sue services or with technology, There are lots of different ways that you have to record things, and the expectation is that we have all that information available for quality assurance and for audit and for research in a much more defined way than perhaps we had when I first started.